He raised his glass at the mic and said, "My biggest disappointment? My daughter, Jenna." "Hi, I'm Jenna Morris from Austin, Texas. I thought I was showing up to my dad's retirement party to support him. Instead, I was the punchline. In front of 100 guests. If this story hits home, make sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your story too. My life wasn't supposed to be a dramatic movie, but lately, it felt like the universe had handed me a script I never auditioned for. I was 29, living in Los Angeles, a city that hummed with a relentless energy I'd come to love. By most objective standards, I was doing well. My digital marketing agency, Pixel Bloom, was finally, after years of sheer grit and countless sleepless nights, gaining traction. We were small, agile, and fiercely creative. But back in Texas, within the hallowed halls of the Morris family estate, I was still just Jenna, the one who zigged when everyone else zagged, the one whose choices were met with polite smiles and bewildered headshakes. My dad, Mark Morris, was a titan in the Dallas construction scene. He'd poured his blood, sweat, and probably a fair few tears into building Morris Construction from a two-man operation into a regional powerhouse. For as long as I could breathe, the family business was the sun around which our entire family orbited. My older brother, Kyle, was the designated heir, groomed from his first Lego set to take over the empire. And to his credit, Kyle embraced it. He was naturally charismatic, effortlessly charming, and genuinely passionate about concrete pours and structural engineering, everything that made my eyes glaze over. He looked the part too, tall, athletic, always impeccably dressed, with an easy smile that could win over the most stubborn city council member. I, on the other hand, found my solace and excitement in the ethereal world of ideas, in the power of words, in the ever-shifting digital landscape. When I announced during my senior year of college that I was ditching the pre-law track, a sensible path, Dad had called it, to move to California and chase a nebulous dream in digital marketing, you would have thought I'd declared my intention to join a traveling circus. The air in our formal dining room had grown thick with unspoken disappointment. Mom had wrung her hands, Dad had let out a long, weary sigh, and Kyle had just looked at me with a mixture of pity and confusion. "But why, Jen?" he'd asked, genuinely perplexed. "There's a whole career waiting for you here. A sure thing." But a sure thing felt like a beautifully gilded cage. I craved the thrill of the unknown, the challenge of carving out my own space, even if it meant facing failure head-on. So, with a loan I'd later work 3 jobs to repay and a suitcase full of ambition, I'd driven west, the Texas plains. Receding in my rearview mirror, replaced by a fierce determination to prove that my path, however unconventional, had merit. It wasn't about proving them wrong in a vindictive way. Not then. It was more about proving to myself that I could do it. The summons back to Dallas was for Dad's retirement party. 40 years, 4 decades of his life dedicated to Morris Construction. It was a monumental milestone. And despite the undercurrent of tension that always hummed between us, I knew I had to be there. The event was at the Dallas Country Club, a bastion of old Southern money and even older traditions. Walking into the grand ballroom, I felt a familiar wave of slight unease. The air was heavy with the scent of expensive perfume and the murmur of polite, carefully modulated conversations. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto tables laden with flowers and gleaming silverware. It felt opulent. A world away from my bustling, open-plan office in LA mom, a vision in a tasteful navy gown, greeted me with a quick, somewhat distracted hug. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, which were darting around the room, no doubt ensuring every detail was perfect. "Jenna, darling, you made it," she said, her voice a little tight. "Your father will be so pleased." I wasn't so sure about that. Kyle, ever the smooth operator, clapped me on the shoulder. "Jen, looking good," he boomed, his gaze flicking over my relatively simple black dress, a stark contrast to the sequins and silks around us. "LA treating you well?" It was a casual question, but there was an undercurrent I couldn't quite decipher. Was it genuine curiosity or a subtle dig? With Kyle, it was often hard to tell. I spent the next hour navigating the social currents, exchanging pleasantries with distant aunts and uncles, business associates of my father I vaguely remembered from childhood Christmases, and friends of my parents who all seemed to ask the same question. So, still out there in California, are you? Their smiles were polite, but their eyes held that familiar hint of skepticism. I tried to brush it off, focusing on Dad, who was holding court near the large, elaborately decorated cake, his laughter booming across the room. He looked happy, undeniably proud of his legacy. A part of me, the part that still longed for his, unconditional approval, felt a flicker of warmth. Then came the speeches. One by one, Dad's colleagues and oldest friends stepped up to the podium, sharing anecdotes, praising his business acumen, his integrity, his unwavering commitment to quality. They painted a picture of a man who had not only built a company, but had also helped build the city. I found myself nodding along, a genuine sense of pride swelling in my chest. He had achieved something remarkable. He was a force. Finally, it was Dad's turn. He approached the microphone with his characteristic confident stride, and an expectant hush fell over the room. He began by thanking everyone, his voice, usually so commanding, touched with a rare note of sentimentality. He spoke of the early struggles, the gambles he'd taken, the satisfaction of watching a blueprint transform into a tangible structure. He then turned his attention to Kyle, his voice brimming with fatherly pride. "And now," he said, beaming, "I have the distinct pleasure of knowing Morris Construction is in the most capable hands. Kyle, my son, has not only learned the ropes, he's ready to weave a stronger future for this company. His vision, his drive, his understanding of this industry, it's everything a father could hope for." The room erupted in applause. Kyle, seated at the head table, acknowledged the praise with a modest nod, but his smile was wide and genuine. My own smile felt a little strained, but I clapped along with everyone else. This was Kyle's moment too, and he deserved it. And then Dad's gaze shifted. It swept across the room, past the admiring faces, and landed with pinpoint accuracy on me. My heart gave a small, nervous thump. "And then there's Jenna," he announced, his tone changing subtly. The warmth was replaced by a kind of wry amusement, an almost theatrical indulgence. Jenna always had different ideas. A few scattered chuckles rippled through the crowd. I felt my cheeks begin to warm. While Kyle was out there with me, learning about load-bearing walls and concrete tensile strength, Jenna was usually glued to her computer screen. The chuckles grew louder, more confident. I could feel dozens of eyes turning towards me. I tried to keep my smile fixed, to look like I was in on the joke. She decided to chase her dreams all the way out to Hollywood, he continued, and the way he said Hollywood made it sound like a slightly disreputable theme park. I lived in Los Angeles, a sprawling metropolis, not some caricature of Tinseltown. Doing something with, what is it, Jen? Hashtags and algorithms? He paused, letting the laughter build. It was a wave now, washing over me, making me feel small and exposed. I still don't quite understand it myself. Sounds a bit like witchcraft to me. My stomach twisted into a tight knot. This wasn't gentle teasing. This was public mockery. He was using his moment of triumph to diminish mine. He wasn't finished. "But you know," he said, his voice taking on a mock philosophical tone, "every family has one, right? The one who marches to the beat of their own, very different drum. The artistic one." He pronounced artistic as if it were a charming but ultimately useless eccentricity, like collecting porcelain dolls. "We love her anyway, of course," he added, a dismissive wave of his hand in my direction. "But let's just say, when it came to who would carry on the Morris legacy, who would build on the solid foundation I laid," he paused dramatically, then turned and gestured expansively towards Kyle. Well, the choice was clear. The applause was thunderous, a roar of approval for Kyle, for Dad, for the enduring strength of Morris Construction, for everything I wasn't. My face burned with a mixture of shame and anger. My hands, clasped tightly in my lap, were trembling. I wanted to disappear, to melt into the plush carpet and vanish. I could feel the pitying glances, the awkward smiles from people who knew this was more than just a joke. Kyle, to his credit, looked a little uncomfortable, but he quickly masked it. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced smiles and mumbled pleasantries. I made my excuses as soon as I possibly could, pleading an early flight, though my actual flight wasn't until the next afternoon. Mom gave me another one of her strained hugs. "It was just your father's way, dear," she whispered, as if that excused the public humiliation. "He doesn't mean any harm." But he did. He meant to put me in my place, to remind everyone and me that I was the outsider, the disappointment. Later that night, back in the sterile silence of my guest room at my parents' house, I couldn't sleep. I wandered downstairs for a glass of water, the house quiet and dark. As I passed Dad's study, I heard his voice, low and rumbling. The door was slightly ajar. He was on the phone, probably with one of his old cronies, rehashing the party. Curiosity, or perhaps a masochistic urge, made me pause. "Yeah, the party was a huge success," he was saying. "Kyle really shone. He's ready." As for Jenna, a short, derisive laugh. She showed up, still doing that internet thing out in California. A nice little hobby for her, I suppose. Keeps her busy. But honestly, between you and me, she'll never amount to anything real, you know? Not like Kyle. Not in the real world. That was it. The casual, private cruelty of that statement, uttered with such certainty, was the final, shattering blow. The public mockery had been painful, but this dismissal, this utter lack of faith from my own father, broke something deep inside me. Tears I'd been holding back all evening pricked at my eyes, hot and furious. But through the haze of hurt, a new feeling began to solidify. A cold, hard resolve. He thought I'd never amount to anything. He thought my work was a hobby. Fine, I wouldn't just prove him wrong, I would make him see. What Dad, and indeed my entire family, didn't know was that Jenna's internet thing was on the cusp of becoming something very real indeed. My little startup, Pixel Bloom, the one I'd poured my life into for the past 5 years, surviving on instant noodles and sheer willpower, had just landed a monumental client. It was a tech company on the verge of launching a revolutionary app, and they'd chosen us, little Pixel Bloom, to spearhead their entire digital launch strategy. The deal, which I'd kept under wraps until it was signed and sealed, was worth $3.5 million. It was more money than I'd ever imagined I'd see in one place, and it was the validation I'd been working towards for so long. It was real. Lying in my childhood bed that night, staring at the faded glow-in-the-dark stars still stuck to the ceiling from a forgotten phase, the plan began to crystallize. It wasn't just about proving Dad wrong anymore. It was about playing his game, but by my rules. He understood business, power, and results. He respected strength. He just didn't see any of those qualities in me or my chosen field. His world was construction. Tangible, solid, built on earth and steel. He underestimated the power of the digital world, the speed at which it could disrupt established industries. He underestimated me. And that underestimation was about to become his biggest blind spot. There was a construction firm in Dallas, Apex Innovate, that had been trying for years to make a dent in Morris Construction's dominance. They were known for good quality, work, and some innovative sustainable building practices, but they lacked the legacy, the deep-rooted connections, and the aggressive marketing that kept Morris Construction at the top. They were struggling. They also had a comprehensive client list, a treasure trove of potential leads if leveraged correctly. Over the next few weeks, back in LA, I moved with a focused intensity I hadn't known I possessed. Using a significant portion of my new capital, I discreetly began the process of acquiring a controlling interest in Apex Innovate. I operated through a shell corporation and a highly trusted business advisor I'd worked with previously, a sharp, older woman named Eleanor Vance who knew the Dallas market inside out and understood the meaning of discretion. She was intrigued by my audacity. "So, you want to go head-to-head with Mark Morris?" Eleanor had asked, a glint in her eye when I first laid out my plan. "That's a bold move, Jenna." "He left me no choice, Eleanor," I'd replied, my voice quiet but firm. "We didn't just inject cash into Apex. We overhauled their entire business development and marketing strategy. I poured my digital expertise into them, building a cutting-edge online presence, targeting specific demographics, and creating compelling campaigns that highlighted their strengths, innovation, client-centric approaches, and a fresh perspective that Morris Construction, in its comfortable dominance, was starting to lack. We analyzed their existing client list, identifying those who might be ripe for a change, those who perhaps felt taken for granted by the industry giant. The work was relentless. I was still running Pixel Bloom, often working late into the night, then switching gears to strategize for Apex. The secrecy was paramount. No one in my family, especially Dad or Kyle, could know about my involvement. During my infrequent calls home, I was vague about work, letting them believe I was still just tinkering with my hobby. Slowly, painstakingly, Apex Innovate began to gain traction. Small contracts at first, then slightly larger ones. We focused on impeccable delivery, on exceeding expectations. Word began to spread. There was a new player in town, a revitalized competitor that was hungry and smart. Then came the opportunity I'd been waiting for. Eleanor, through her network, learned that two of Morris Construction's major, long-standing clients were becoming increasingly frustrated. Projects were experiencing delays, costs were creeping up, and their concerns were being met with what they perceived as arrogance or indifference from Kyle, who was now more prominently fronting the company. Perhaps Dad's guiding hand had been more crucial than Kyle realized. This was our moment. My team at Apex, armed with a killer presentation I'd personally overseen and a proposal that was both competitive and innovative, made their move. We didn't directly criticize Morris Construction. We simply offered a better alternative, a more attentive partnership. Weeks later, the news came. Apex Innovate had secured both contracts. They were huge, landmark deals that would significantly shift the balance of power in the Dallas construction scene. The call to my father was one I both dreaded and anticipated. It was a Tuesday morning. I was reviewing analytics for Pixel Bloom when Eleanor patched me through. His secretary sounded flustered when I gave my name. Mark Morris speaking. His voice was abrupt, already laced with irritation. He clearly knew bad news was coming or had already arrived. "Dad, it's Jenna," I said, keeping my voice level. "Professional?" A surprised silence. Then, "Jenna? What is it?" "I'm in the middle of something." "I imagine you are," I said calmly. I heard Morris Construction lost the Henderson account, and the City Center Tower project as well. "How did you hear about that?" he snapped. "It's none of your damn business." "Actually, Dad," I replied, allowing a cool edge to enter my voice. "It's very much my business. You see, the company that just won those contracts, Apex Innovate, the one that outbid you, the one with the surprisingly effective marketing, and the client-focused approach." I paused, letting the silence stretch. "That's my company." The silence on the other end was profound. I could practically hear the gears in his mind grinding, trying to process what I just said. I envisioned his face, the shock, the dawning comprehension, the inevitable fury. "Your company?" He finally choked out, his voice a hoarse whisper. "What in God's name are you talking about, Jenna? This isn't funny." "I assure you, I'm not laughing," I said. "I invested in Apex. I helped them rebuild, strategize. We offered your former clients a better deal, a better partnership, and they took it. You always said business is business, Dad. You taught me the importance of results." I could hear him sputtering, a string of incoherent curses. You did this? To your own father? To your brother? To the family legacy?" "You publicly humiliated me, Dad," I reminded him, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering. "You told me I'd never amount to anything. You dismissed my entire career as a joke. Well, it seems my hobby has had quite an impact on your real world. Consider this my contribution to the family discussion on business." I didn't wait for his tirade. I simply said, "I have to go now. Goodbye, Dad." And I hung up the phone, my hand slightly trembling. There was no triumph. Not yet. Just a hollow sort of ache and the grim satisfaction of a difficult task completed. The ensuing storm was predictable. Mom called, distraught, accusing me of trying to destroy the family. Kyle called, furious and bewildered, demanding to know why I would betray them like this. I explained my reasons calmly, pointed to Dad's own words at the party, to his dismissal of me. They didn't understand, or perhaps they didn't want to. After a few such calls, I stopped answering. I had made my statement in the language my father understood best, the language of business. Several months later, I found myself back in Dallas for an industry awards gala. Apex Innovate was nominated for a couple of awards, a testament to our rapid turnaround. I knew Dad and Kyle would be there representing Morris Construction. I dressed carefully that evening, choosing a power suit in a striking cobalt blue. I felt calm, centered. I spotted Dad across the crowded ballroom. He was standing alone near a pillar, a drink in his hand, looking older than I remembered, his shoulders slightly slumped. He wasn't the boisterous center of attention tonight. Kyle was busy networking, a forced smile plastered on his face. Taking a deep breath, I walked over to him. He saw me approach, and his face hardened, his eyes cold. "Jenna," he said, his voice flat, devoid of any warmth. "Dad," I replied, my tone equally neutral. I caught the eye of a passing waiter and took 2 glasses of champagne from the tray. I offered one to him. He hesitated for a long moment, then reluctantly took it. His fingers brushed mine, a fleeting, almost electric contact. I raised my glass, slightly. "Here's to your retirement, Dad," I said, my voice clear and steady, easily audible above the din. "I hope your golden boy has learned enough to keep the company afloat. Competition is fierce these days." I took a small, deliberate sip of my champagne, my eyes holding his. I saw a flicker of something in their depths. Anger, yes, but also a grudging, almost imperceptible acknowledgement, maybe even a sliver of shock that his artistic daughter had outmaneuvered him in his own arena. Without another word, I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, the untouched, champagne flute still in his hand. I didn't look back. The path I'd chosen hadn't been easy. The hurt inflicted by my father's words hadn't magically disappeared. But as I navigated the glittering ballroom, no longer an outsider but a player in my own right, I felt a sense of profound, quiet empowerment. I hadn't done it for revenge, not solely. I had done it to claim my space, to demand respect, to prove, not just to him but to myself, what I was truly capable of. And in the end, I had rewritten the script on my own terms. If you've ever been underestimated by your own family, I hope this story gives you the strength to rise above. Like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. You never know who might need your story today.